What's going down, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum. Together we are Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. My name is Ryan. This is episode 273. Welcome to the show. Welcome back, whatever applies to you. It's good to have you. It's good to be here. We are on 273. I'm trying not to die because it's so cold outside. We mentioned this on, I think, Commander Cookout yesterday, if you were listening. This is the last day of our cold spell. It's supposed to warm up, and I am here telling you to stay indoors, listen to podcasts, enjoy all the new content on the CCO Media Group YouTube channel. We've got the cedh stuff from John from Gemstone Mine. Go have a watch. And CommanderCookout.com is all updated to include the new content. The RSS feed for the podcast is there for Gemstone Mine podcast. And of course, links to the cedh YouTube playlist on the Commander Cookout YouTube page. Wanted to mention that right off the hop. Wanted to say thank you to official sponsors of Commander Ad Populum, FusionGamingOnline.com. You can go there for all your gaming needs. Of course, great store to work with, LGS. Real life store, great internet outlet for buying cards or selling cards, like working with those guys. Next up, I want to say a big thank you to the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/CADPopcast. Couldn't do the show without you guys. I appreciate it. We're talking about, over the last day or so, talking about football and hockey and stuff in there. It's not all sports talk in there, but we were telling stories about, kind of emotional stories about sports. And I was watching the Rams and the Lions game, and those are my two NFC teams in the NFL. And man alive, the two quarterbacks, the story, we were just getting into it. And then hockey came up and we're getting into favorite players and stuff. So like all that kind of discussion, it's great to, I guess, to have kind of a different topic du jour in your established kind of place where you go. Sometimes it's refreshing to have something different. Different is good. Changing it up is good. I want to talk a little bit about that today. I want to talk a little bit about how refreshing the change on YouTube has been lately, listening and working with John. Again, I mentioned going back to that Gemstone Mine because the content's good and I'm excited about it because it's refreshing to me, because it's kind of like this. Back in the day, I was listening to podcasts like Monday Night Magic, and there was another one called The Magic Sock, and they were very much tailored to kind of casual, cultural side of Magic and the humorous side, the funny side of Magic. And Commander Cast was like that too. That's another oldie but a goodie. It was called Commander Cast before the format was even called Commander. It was still EDH at the time. But then limited resources started up. This is like right around when Zendikar came out. They started the show with Zendikar. Limited resources did, and it was so refreshing because it was like a new take on some kind of format that I really loved. The MTG podcast, when I'm walking through the university or driving to work or whatever, I could listen to Magic on the radio. And when limited resources started, it was like, oh man, I can learn about like competitive tight play and like how to draft and how to become better at Magic, the real nuts and bolts mechanics of it. And now I'm getting that same kind of feeling with John's contributions to the CCO Media Group, the CCOMG, because it's like, oh, competitive, tight play, exact card choices, meta considerations for cEDH. And it's like, wow, this is so much different than Brando and myself talking about, Lord of Tressorhorn and doing set reviews and jank brews and funny meme decks, right? It's and don't get me wrong, I love that. That's why I've been doing it for so long. But to switch it up and have something different is just refreshing. And the Patreon Discord, I got that again, a little hit of that with the sports talk yesterday. So fantastic stuff. Big thanks to everybody who's listened, tuned in, subscribed, who's liked that and gave their advice or congratses for the new content. And of course, to all the patrons for the continued support and the Discord kind of interactions. So I've got a little update here. Last week we were talking about taking decks apart. And the week before that, we were talking about organizing, your play space or your house or your area. For me, my office and my Magic card kind of storage and collection, and the CCO kind of merch inventory kind of office situation. And I've got in front of me 3 cards here. I've got Prismatic Bridge, the backside legendary enchantment, Wooburg. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So that is the commander of my Crab deck, a deck that I haven't talked about for a while because it's kind of ripped apart and in pieces because I've pillaged the mana base and some of the more powerful cards out of it for other decks that I've been wanting to build or that I've built recently. Then I've got Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. This is white, green, red, 1/5/4 cat demon. Creatures you control get +1, and Vig, if you've got 3 creatures, they get an additional +1, and Trample, if you've got 6 creatures, additional +1, and Double Strike if you have 9 creatures. And this is the commander for my Saproling token deck, Naya Saproling tokens, that I wanted to have helmed by Rith the Awakener, the 6/6 flyer that when he hits you, you could pay green 2 and make a green Saproling creature token for each color of permanent that you choose, right? Like choose green and you get a Saproling for each green permanent on the battlefield, for example. But my friend Jesse has a Rith deck, and that's a little bit of a rule in lots of groups, it turns out, that you don't build the same deck that somebody else has. So Jesse's got that, so I have Jetmir, and man alive, Jetmir, Crater Hoof in the command zone. We're going to talk about why I have this in front of me in a second. And then I've got Bryon Stoutarm, old fastball Bryon, 4/4 giant warrior, white, red, 2, lifelink, red, tap, sack another creature. Bryon Stoutarm deals damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to target player. So that's Fling in the command zone. And I've got these 3 cards because as part of my organization and as part of my condensation of collection and decks and merch and kind of space that Magic takes up physically and mentally, I've decided to downsize my decks. I talked about it last week. And these 3 are the 3 that I think are going to be on the chopping block. And if you want to chime in, of course, let me know, like if you've ever played against me or these decks, or if you've seen these decks on Sidewalk Slam on the CCO YouTube channel, let me know. At CCO Podcast, you can get at me there. Or, of course, you can hit me up, cadpopcast@gmail.com. Links and Twitters and social medias and all that are going to be in the show notes wherever you find the show. Including on YouTube, there is an audio version there that I share from the podcasting platform. So if you like to do all of your stuff on one platform, you can do it on YouTube. Thought I would mention that as well. So I've got Bryon, Jetmir, Prismatic Bridge here. The Crab deck is in disarray, but hey, look at this. It's a 5-color deck, so I'm flipping through, and I got the mana base because I've been playing for a long time, and I go, hey, I could probably use this Marsh Flats somewhere, and oh man, I could definitely use this Arid Mesa in my new Dinos and Vehicles deck, and I could definitely use this random trolley one-off Bayou that I found in my Crab deck, and I was like, oh man, I put that in here just to troll people, to tell them like the mana base is good but the deck is so bad. And it was like a funny joke that I had this extra Bayou. It's like a first world MTG problem, right? So I could definitely use that somewhere. And then I go to my Bryon Stoutarm deck, and I'm flipping through, and it's one of my oldest decks, so I'm really having a tough time with this. But it a little bit feels outdated, and it's not the greatest deck. I think I've played it on Sidewalk Slam like 3 times and just got pounded all 3 times. It doesn't feel like it has the modern oomph that Commander decks have. It's like, make one big guy, attack somebody, fling it, rinse and repeat. And that doesn't feel like it works in how Commander works any longer, at least not in my meta, at least not in how my meta's evolved since this deck was good. And I mean good like 2019 or 2021 after we got back to in-store play, this deck was good. But that was like, 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I feel like Commanders sort of passed it by. And a little bit that's my fault for not keeping it up to date or assuming or having the mindset like this deck is, air quotes, done. And sure, like decks can be done or decks can constantly evolve, whatever it is. But I haven't done really anything with this, including play it a whole bunch because I'm, like I said last week, up to 17 decks. And if this one goes, it's going to free up a whole bunch of like shock lands, one shock land, one dual land, couple fetch lands. It's going to free up things like my foil smothering tithe. It's going to free up a whole bunch of cards that I could alter and put on Facebook or put in the altar binder for taking to events. It's going to free up foil basics. It's going to free up swords and paths and my Avacyn, Angel of Everybody's Indestructible. It's going to free up all of this kind of deck building equity that I have just kind of sitting there. It's going to help me round out a couple cards here and there that I'm missing for like complete sets. That's a thing that I sort of collect. And when I combine all of those things together, I don't play it. Commanders kind of passed it by. It's not very like it's not very good anymore. It's not very competitive in my meta anymore. It's going to, from a business standpoint, help me out with getting cards to alter. It's going to make my other decks better, or it's going to spread a bunch of its bling around to other decks, which all makes for an easier decision when trying to make the call like, yes, I'm taking this deck apart. The same is kind of true for Jetmir in that it's a 3-color deck, so it's got a lot of like the signets and mana rocks. It's got a lot of mana dorks like Birds of Paradise and like Gilded Goose because it's a token deck and it makes like a food token, right? So it's got lots of stuff that is good or could be painted. But more than anything, because remember, I can't make it into a Rith deck. More than anything, I a little bit feel like I've done the Jetmir thing. And I think this is kind of a common sentiment for people as they mature as Magic players. If you've done the thing, the deck is linear, and I've done the thing a bunch of times, and it doesn't really hold any forever deck significance to me, why am I keeping it together? Why do I need to have it in my deck box just to not get played when there's cards that I could be using elsewhere? It's the same color as my Dinosaurs in Vehicles deck that I'm currently in the development of, so I could pillage a lot of the mana base, I could pillage a lot of the mana rocks, I could use some of the mana dorks in this Jetmir deck that are better than the ones I scraped together for my Vehicles deck. And I talked about not building the same commander as one of my friends has. Ultimately, his Naya Saproling deck is kind of like my Naya Saproling deck, though mine has a little bit more punch. He's doing tokens, token doublers, Rith, he's got the Itlamox and the things that tap for the number of creatures you have, and he's doing big damage and Crater Hoof and all the stuff that I'm doing, he's also doing. So why do we have two of the same deck in our meta? It doesn't make sense. And I've got other forever decks that are 3-color, challenging, less linear, all of the stuff that, again, makes it an easy decision to put this on the chopping block. The only thing that's kind of holding this one together for me is when I was first getting into Magic, like circa 2001, Invasion was the set du jour, and I had this random magazine that I just found in a gas station, like when I was at my friend's grandma's cabin for the week with my friend. And I bought this and I read the whole magazine. And there was like a puzzle in the back that was saying like, okay, this Saproling card, this Saproling card, this Saproling card. How many tokens can you make? How much damage can you do? Was the puzzle. And it wasn't an Inquest Gamer. It was some other magazine I had never heard of. So anyways, from this article and this puzzle, I had this weird kind of notion or desire to build a Saproling deck. And I did, and it was kind of like my first good deck that I played casually in the group or the meta from the city I was with. And I fell in love with the weird Saproling creature type and with Rith the Awakener and token combos. I fell in love with all of that. And Jetmir Saproling deck kind of represents that early Magichood childhood experience that I had. So that kind of makes me feel like I should keep this deck together. But again, it's the same deck as in my meta. I've done the Jetmir thing. It's too easy. It's literally Crater Hoof in the command zone for 4 mana. Cast your commander and win is really how it feels. Especially in casual where there isn't a whole ton of counter spells or interaction, and of course not enough instant speed removal for a token army just on a whim. I feel like it might come apart, especially, and here's one that I don't think gets enough attention as a reason to build or to pillage or what have you, but my Dinosaurs in Vehicles deck is a Naya deck, and this Jetmir deck is a Naya deck. I want to develop this Dinosaur in Vehicle deck. I mean, it's totally a meme, but if I can develop it to a point where it's actually good and it can see play across a wide variety of competition levels, like from jank to versus precons to like powerful and tuned because it's got interaction or removal, or it packs a big enough punch that it can aggro you out before you can kind of stabilize, a la traditional kind of how multiplayer Magic used to work. If I can develop that deck using cards like the removal and the mana rocks and some of the powerful stuff that's in Jetmir, why am I not doing that? It's going to give me so much more play. It's going to give me the satisfaction as an older or matured Magic deck builder, somebody who's done the Jetmirs and the aggros and the combos and the controls. I've kind of done all of those things just because I've played Magic for so long and explored the format. I look to things like Dinosaurs in Vehicles. I look to when it dies on every card in my Lord of Tressorhorn deck. I look to, weird stuff like all the creatures in my deck are crabs, and I'm playing the Crab Prismatic Bridge. That's the kind of thing I look to now as a deck builder because, and I know I've talked about this on the show, the satisfaction of doing this weird, off-the-wall, and frankly less powerful than any established mainstream strategy is far more rewarding for me when I get a win or when I make a good play or make a really good discovery for the deck that I haven't seen in other lists or isn't on edhrec.com. And again, I go back to my Dinosaurs in Vehicles deck. I found Umbral Mantle and Pillipala, the ones that untap to do stuff. And if I tap a Pillipala to crew and then pay 2 to untap it to get mana, essentially what I'm doing there is turning the tap to crew into untap my Pillipala for mana at the cost of 2 mana to do that with Pillipala. I'm turning the crew activation into a mana activation. I hadn't seen that anywhere online. Pillipala is like a 2-drop 1/1 that says 2 untap, add 1 mana of any color. So if I got a crew 1 vehicle, I crew it with Pillipala, then pay 2 to untap Pillipala. I've got a crewed vehicle, I've got 1 mana of any color, and I'm down a mana. So it's certainly not a combo, which Pillipala is normally associated with, but it lets me spend 1 mana and have an untapped creature to then crew again, that I can then untap. So I'm spending 1 mana to crew a bunch of vehicles each time. Like 1 mana equals 1 crew, essentially. And I thought that was a cool discovery, something unique. Again, I hadn't seen it used in this way. And that's what gives me satisfaction as a brewer, as a player, to demonstrate that, to tell people about that, to have that be a strategy that performs well and even wins me a game, maybe. That's what I'm into. And Bryon Stoutarm doesn't do that for me now. Everybody knows that he's a fling guy. He just plays big creatures, steal stuff, fling stuff. That's the deck. Jetmir, make 8 or 9 Saproling tokens, play a pump spell or a doubling season, play a Jetmir, win the game. That just doesn't do it for me anymore. Prismatic Bridge, 5 color, I need all those land in other decks. And even if it is a crab deck, it's like, I got other weird decks that I don't need crabs. So I think these 3 are going to be on the chopping block. I'm going to disperse the cards, and I'm going to call it a day. Sitting here with my other cards in hand, of course I've got Animar. That's my cedh deck that's all painted. I've got Pantlaza, the dinosaur sun-favored Cascady guy. That's a Naya deck that I'm going to use cards from all 3 of these decks to kind of bolster. I've got Bruvac that I'm developing into Bruvac cedh, but also flip out into Bruvac beats, like mill with big creatures and sphinxes and stuff. I've got Gwai here as my good guy Lord of the Rings deck, and Sauron my bad guy one. Estrid the Bald, which really, this is the Planeswalker one, the Bant Planeswalker that lets you untap each enchanted permanent you control and you make a ton of mana, and then I Hurricane. It's a little bit of a one-trick pony, and I feel like I don't play this one very often, but it doesn't have a whole ton of cards that I would use elsewhere, and I feel like it needs a little bit of a tweak. I need to lean a little bit harder into the big creatures and the enchantments like Ancestral Mask and All That Glitters and Nylea's Colossus. I know that makes it feel a little bit like every other Enchantress deck, whereas mana doubling or tripling, then untapping, and then doing a big Hurricane or Squall line, that's a little bit unique, but a little bit one tricky. So definitely going to go under the hood of this one and see what I can do here, because I want to play it more, but it doesn't quite give me enough. So maybe that'll be the next one I either look at tweaking or look at taking apart. We'll see. Got the Archimandrite. That's the Advisor one with the life gain. So fun. Lord of Tressorhorn. That's kind of a forever deck at this point. Calamax, my community build that I bring to events all the time and have people doodle on or sign if they beat me. Alenda, it's an event deck. I bring it to nearly every event because it's got so much play and it's so non-linear. I've got Zada, Hedron Grinder. It's fast combo deck. I play that at the end of the day, of course, when we only have a few minutes and everybody's playing fast combo decks. Orvar, the All Form. This is another event deck. It's non-linear. It's an aggro mono blue strategy that has a whole bunch of different creature types matters. Merfolks and Mirrors and Wizards. And it's very powerful. Even as a mono blue aggro deck, it's very powerful. And because it's been around for so long, I really know how to pilot it well. So it feels like it never has a bad game. That's a good one. Bring it to lots of events. And then I've got 2 more here that are a little bit challenging to parse through why I want to keep them together. I've got Balthor the Defiled. This is my zombie deck, mono black. It's got a ton of tutors in it, which makes it feel very consistent as a combo deck. It's got Graveyard tutors, ETB tutors, Mill Myself tutors, or Mill Myself combos, but it doesn't need to. And I think this is the reason I keep it together. Also, it's one of my oldest decks. But if I want to tutor for a Zombie Lord, I'll tutor for a Zombie Lord, and I'll go the aggro route, or I'll go the big mana route throughout the game, and instead of comboing, maybe just keep myself alive and late game exsanguinate, which feels anticlimactic, but when you're doing zombie beats in mono black, it gives you a special kind of old school feeling, again, going back to like 2001, 2002, 2003, like Invasion, Odyssey, Onslaught, where they were really pushing creature type matters, and they were really pushing zombies versus beasts versus birds versus, oh man, what else was there? Elves were the green one, goblins were the red one, of course. They were really pushing like traditional fantasy creature types, and this one just gives me so much nostalgia, the same kind of nostalgia that Jetmir gives me. But if I've got all those other reasons to take Jetmir apart, then maybe I keep Balthor. It's got more foils, and probably it's the better deck if you don't count Jetmir being a win condition in the command zone. That is like so easy to set up. I don't know. This is another one that I have a lot of feelings for, and I think about a lot. And I've spent a lot of time making up combos and having like weird card includes in it to make graveyard combos and stuff work. So it feels a little bit closer to the heart than Jetmir, despite Jetmir being the deck that gives me all like the young feels. But so does Balthor. So it's like, oh man, what do I do, right? Balthor, Stain, Jetmir's going. That's what I've decided. Then finally, I've got the Child of Alara 68 land deck. This is kind of a novelty meme deck where I'll say something like, hey, I've got this deck that's got 68 land in it or 70 land in it. And people are like, wait, what? I want to see that. And it turns out that it's like all these creature lands and lands to keep me alive. It ends up being a control deck with Sweepers, Wrath of Gods, Cyclonic Rifts, and of course, Ad Nauseam to draw my whole deck and combo you out, of course. And it's a Child of Alara deck, so it's 5 colors, which kind of gives me an overlap with that Prismatic Bridge 5-color deck. And I've already got one of those. I don't need another one of those with all the fancy lands and stuff. So that's where my headspace is at. I've kind of explored this topic over the last few weeks of organizing my life and my son's room and my office and cleaning the house post-Christmas and doing the scrub down into kind of organizing and creating efficiencies in my work life with kind of a new desk arrangement and a new closet and merch arrangement. And now the reason that I have or do any of these things is because Magic and Commander, and that's how all of this thinking in the podcast and everything started. Now I'm looking at my decks. Now that everything's in order, I'm looking at my decks. And maybe there's a lesson in there about priorities, right? Priorities and procrastination or lack thereof, and how important that is. One could make a point or an argument about using magic and fantasy and games as a little bit of escapism and trying to get out of whatever difficult situation, hardship, getting away, taking a break from the mundane, the work, the pressure, the family life, the Christmas life, the money, all that stuff. You could use games for that reason, and you could make that point in the argument. But what I'm saying here with priorities and procrastination is I really, over the last month, have been looking at things that are going to make my life and the lives of the people directly around me, like my wife and my son, their lives better, easier, more efficient, more creative. And that's where I went. That was the whole conversation with the desk and the Lego desk that I talked about a couple weeks ago, and the scrub down of the house and getting all the pine needles out of the stair cracks and, all the mess that the Christmas tree makes when you take it down, whether it's artificial or real, glitter and needles and cords and little hangers from your Christmas balls that fall off. I helped Rebecca get all of that clean, organized it all before I did any of my new Magic deck building. And the door to the office had to be shut the whole time because my Pantlaza dinosaur deck was just kind of laid out in a stack or a couple stacks on the ground, and the dog couldn't come in here because she would eat the Magic cards. I'm not even kidding. I deprioritized my own gaming experience and my own kind of pleasure and enjoyment further when I said, hey, I've got to make this more accessible for me, easier for me, both from a work or professional or vocational standpoint, but also from a leisure and creativity standpoint. I don't have a ton of time to play Magic, despite working on it all the time. Why not organize all my stuff? And then once it's organized, it'll be so easy to find cards and make decisions and decide what I want to play and build and thing and da-da-da. Once I prioritized my son's enjoyment in his room and all that stuff, and helped my wife out, made all that stuff accessible, easy for them, then I could do my own thing. My own thing led to the decisions I made on my decks. And I think when you combine all of that together, my limited amount of time playing Magic, right? And maybe once per week isn't that limited for people, or twice per week if there's no hockey practice isn't limited for people. Maybe that's lots, but it is finite. So my finite amount of time that I play Magic in a week or a month, I think is going to be a much higher quality. I'm going to enjoy my decks more. They're going to be a little bit more tuned, or they're just going to work better. They're going to be more bling. I'm going to have less decisions and less misplays and less forgetting what decks do because I'm going to have less of them. I think all of these things lead to a higher quality experience. And that doesn't even count playing like in Chicago at the end of next month, where I don't have to choose from 17 decks. I only have to choose from, 15 or 14 or 12 or however many decks I take apart. And that's going to make my decision going there all that much easier, hauling less stuff, less hemming and hawing. What do I bring? Is this deck good enough? Is it finished enough? No, I'm just going to know. All my decks are going to work. These are the ones I'm bringing because these are the ones I have. And kind of the mental weight of playing Magic is going to be easier to manage. That's kind of a weird thing to say of a hobby or of a game. But when you got too much going on, whether that be your hobby or otherwise, it kind of can weigh down on you. So wherever you can, prioritize kind of getting your stuff in a line. And I think that's going to increase the quality of your leisure time. I think that's the CAD Pop lesson of the day. I think that's it. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say thank you to all of the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/CADPopcast. Let me know in the Discord what you think. Have you taken any decks apart of late? What are you bringing to Chicago? I know a lot of the people in the Discord are coming to Chicago. Some of them are staying right in the CCO house with myself and Brando and everybody that's going to be there. It's going to be fantastic. If you're not going to be in the house, though, come find us. We're going to have our own CCO area. We're in the creator area and everything. Brando's got the schedule. I think it's 2 p.m., 2:30 on Saturday. I don't know. We'll put it out there. Everybody's going to know. It's going to be a ton of fun. Big thank you to official sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. Of course, the place that I went to get all my crappy vehicles for my Dinosaurs and Cadillacs deck. I hope that one lasts. I really do. I hope I can get it to a point where I'm going to be happy and confident to play it, proud to play it, and people are going to want to sit down and see it and play against it. I really hope that that's what happens. And final big thank you this week goes to John over at Gemstone Mine on the CCO Media Group YouTube page. Great new stuff there. Check it out. Subscribe on Spotify or iTunes or Google, wherever you listen to your podcasts. You could listen on Spreaker. That's our new host platform. And of course, it's all available on YouTube, whether it be lessons from cedh, interviews with other creators on hot brews, or all smushed into one big podcast that you just listen to the whole playlist all at once. So big thanks to John for that. And with all that being said, everybody, I will see you next Wednesday.